Hi everyone, welcome to April's Microsoft Cloud Security User Group. I'm Charlie, and kind of my co-host and kind of partner in crime here is Chris. So obviously Chris is Scouser, so you'll be able to tell where he's from. So first off, Chris, do you want to just cover this section?
Yeah, so I'm Chris Wright. So obviously co-host here with Charlie. So one of our friends, the user group, Dwayne Nantwick, very big in the community, great guy. He's actually presented here as well for us on our first user group session. He's been asked to run on behalf of Packets, who's a great books publisher, and he's running the Packet Secure Pro community. It's a Discord group, and it's purely security focused. So you're more than welcome to join up if that's your thing, or you want to learn more about security. But I presume that's why you're here. So you can join either at that link, scan the QR code, and it'll take you to the Discord channel, where you'll be able to sign up and join. So
we'll pop the links in the chat as well, just so that they're available. So first off, always like to kind of start off with our code of conduct. So really high level piece is it's a fun, safe place to learn about Microsoft Cloud Security. That's what we're here to do. We're here to help everyone out in the community. We're inclusive and diverse. We actively encourage that. We want everyone to learn, really. Whatever level your knowledge is, that's what we're here to do. And with that, we expect every member of this group to respect each other, whether they're attending or presenting at our group. One other thing I just want to cover off, obviously, the session is going to be recorded today, and it'll be uploaded onto our YouTube channel. So just if anybody could refrain from anything that's under NDA, that'd be much appreciated. So covering off quickly our socials. So we've got our YouTube channel, our LinkedIn page, and also our Twitter account here. So, and again, I'll post these links. I'll post these links into the chat shortly. Then just a quick little bit about myself and Chris. So as I already said, I'm Charlie Goff. I'm based in the UK in the Southwest. I work for a company called Open Systems, which is based out of Zurich, who are an MDR provider and also offer professional services. Been in the tech world now for circa longer than like 21 years, roughly. So it's kind of dragging on a little bit. And yeah, just really want to get involved in the community, help others out. How I've learned more than anything is through helping others and people helping me. So I want to give back into the community, really. Chris?
Yeah, so I'm Chris Wright, currently an Azure SME, HTG. As Charlie mentions, yeah, I'm from Liverpool. So I discovered the community just over 12 months ago, and this is my way of sort of giving back. The company I work for, HTG, are based just outside of Newcastle, in an area called Hebburn. And we're an MSP, but with a strong focus within security. And this user group sort of aligns exactly with that path that I'm looking to go down. I've got a real passion for security, particularly around the Microsoft stack. And also, as you can see, the user group is sponsored by HCG, so a massive thank you to Kev and the rest of the team. We've actually got George with us here tonight. So yeah, that's me, and that's who I work for.
Okay. Yeah, we're going to just hand over briefly to George to kind of give a few words and a little bit of space to talk about HTG.
Thanks for that, Charlie. George Galloway. I'm Sales and Marketing Director at HTG. We're proud sponsors of the group. And I don't really want to eat into your technical discussions tonight, but I'll just give you a very brief summary. HTG are a cloud solution provider, of which Chris is one of our consultants, and we've been very successful based around the Microsoft stack. We're a gold partner. We have 11 specializations, and just on the theme, one of the topics you're covering tonight, Microsoft Defender, we ran a Sentinel, managed Sentinel webinar today, covering Defender and Lighthouse, and just to give you a feel for the SME audience, we had 140 registrants for that event, which is quite a success rate. Very, very good recording, 45 minutes long, and I'd encourage you to register on the HTG site and have a look at that webinar. You can also register for access to our blogs and white papers, and we're keen to engage. We're always looking for project opportunities, and we're always looking for resources that we can have access to work on our projects with our commercial customers out there. I don't really want to spend a great deal of time dwelling on HTG. We've got loads of great information packs, accelerator packs, assessment packs that you can read about on our website. So without taking any more of the evening, thanks for having us as sponsors, and I hope you enjoy your tech discussions tonight.
Thanks very much, George.
Right. So, on to the next, which is the agenda. So we've got Fabian, who's going to talk about, who's our first speaker, talking about using external threat intelligence in Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. And then we're following up with Marcel, who's going to be talking about automating Azure role-based access control using DevOps. So without further, and obviously finally after that, we'll have our quiz with some prizes. So we'll go through that after the speakers. So Fabian, are you good to take over?
Yes, sure.
Cool.
So let me just share my screen here. I don't want to get too much into slides, but let me just put a few of them on. I'm Fabian Bader. I'm from Hamburg, Germany. I'm a cloud architect at the Kanya GAB AG, and I just recently switched to them starting this month. I also have a private blog. It's called cloudbrothers.info. So if you like to follow there, please visit it, check out the articles there. And you can also follow me on Twitter. I'm also the organizer of the Hamburg PowerShell user group. And if you should have any questions regarding this talk today or anything else, you can also hit me up via email, just fabian@bader.cloud. And without any further ado, let me go to the agenda of this talk. So first, I want to do a short introduction to Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. Then we will talk about the external threat intelligence we are using today. It's called Fiodo Tracker. And then we get into how to use it within Defender for Endpoint using stuff like custom detection rules, and how we can also leverage indicators of compromise and network protection to automate the whole process of protecting your endpoints from known C2 or command and control servers. And the whole thing shouldn't be too much of slides, and I will start demoing the most part of it in a live demo. So wish me luck that everything works out. Yes, Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. I think most of you have heard about it. It's the Microsoft offering, and it's mostly agentless XDR solution. Mostly, I say, because Windows 10, 11, and Windows Server 2019 and up don't need an additional agent. They have all the detection already built in, or the tooling built in. For anything below, you would still need an agent. Microsoft has put a few capabilities into this XDR solution, so it's not only the Microsoft Defender antivirus that most of you might know, but there is cloud detection that comes with this solution, and also an EDR solution. As an EDR solution, it tracks everything that happens on a device. So if you visit a website or you open a program or an attacker is executing some malicious command, all this data is sent to the cloud, to Microsoft, aggregated, analyzed, and if needed, alerted. So it's a complete solution that protects not only your endpoints, but also your servers, and does more than signature-based or ML-based virus detection, but it also can detect behaviors like accessing elders processes, stuff like that, or running scans on your network, and can alert based on this behavior on the client. You also get some threat and vulnerability management with it. So you get insights on which software is installed on your devices and which version of software is out there. Just to give you a quick overview of what this product can do. I won't get too much into the specifics of each feature. And one feature I want to lean on today is mostly the detection of actions on the device regarding network activity. And Microsoft has already great detection in there. So something like Cobalt Strike is detected based on patterns that the Cobalt Strike beacon is using to contact any C2 server. But we can even further enhance this using external information. And this is where the Fiodo tracker comes into play. The Fiodo tracker is a project, it's an open source project, and they track not only different C2 servers, they have different projects under the domain abuse.ch. They have a huge database of virus samples and stuff like that. But the Fiodo tracker in particular tracks everything that is related to Emotet, TrickBot, and all those C2 servers get analyzed live in the internet. And if a new server is detected, it is added to a list. And as you can see in the screenshot I put in here, they're tracking online as well as offline sources. So as soon as a server is no longer reachable, it gets marked as offline. And this is also something we are going to use in this example today. And the best thing about Fiodo Tracker is the whole thing is completely free of charge, even for commercial use. So if you should use it to add it to a product or anything else, products or offerings for your customers as well. To use all of this, we are going to use or leverage this, we are going to use custom detections. Custom detections is a feature within Microsoft Defender for Endpoint that allows you to use what's called advanced hunting to search for specific actions or occurrences within your data. And based on your findings, you can then alert and also take action. We will look at this a bit closer in a moment. Another part of the detection we are going to use is a feature called indicators of compromise. And this is where you can put in a list of IP addresses or file hashes within Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. And based on what action you select, the endpoints will get this list of information and act accordingly. So if you put an indicator for, say, a file with an SHA-1 hash or a SHA-265 hash, it can be detected as a custom virus. So something you might have in your environment and you want to plug it through your whole enterprise, indicators of compromise are the way to go. And also, you can do the same with IP addresses. And this is something where another feature that is not completely related to Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, but is part of the Microsoft Defender antivirus part of the whole solution, and it's called network protection. You might all know Smart Screen, the solution for Microsoft within the Edge browser and Internet Explorer, where you can visit a website and it gets blocked based on reputation or anything, might be malicious, or a website that's offering gambling, and this should be blocked in your environment. And network protection takes this even further. So you don't have to use a specific browser or install some kind of extension within Chrome to use it, but it's built into the operating system. So any program that runs on Windows and is trying to access a website, or any IP address for this matter, is getting blocked, and the user is getting alerted that he can't access this website. And so you could block anything from a Dropbox client if you enter all the IP addresses, to what we are doing today, malware that is trying to connect to a C2 server. So let's get off the slides and right into the demo. If you should have any questions while I'm demoing this, please just unmute yourself and talk to me. I won't look at the chat all the time. I also try to, but if you have anything, just interrupt me and we will go a bit deeper there. So this is the Microsoft Defender for Endpoint portal. On the left side, you have the different parts of the product. So we have the endpoint parts. So this is Microsoft Defender for Endpoint as we will look at it today. We also have other things like
Fabian?
Yes?
Sorry, not a question. I guess a question. Would you mind zooming in a bit on that screen? Because you've got a very big screen and I have a very small screen. Thanks, buddy.
Sorry for that. Yes. I hope this is much better.
Perfect for me. Thank
you. Dean, you can ask licensing questions, but let's look who can answer them. Yeah. So we have the Defender for Endpoint part here, and we have the email and collaboration, the Microsoft Defender for Office 365, like it's called now, part here. So we will look at the Defender for Endpoint, as well as the alerts and hunting in this session today. So before we dive into the portal, let's get over to the Fiodo Tracker project. This is the website of the project where you can download the block list, and there are two different versions of the block list. One is a plain text and one is JSON. Let me just open up both of them. As you can see, within the block list, the plain text block list is just a list of IP addresses, and this one only contains active C2 servers, active C2 server IP addresses. If we look at the IP address, but also the port on which the C2 server is running, and some additional information like country, first seen, last. So it's more information. Looking into the Fiodo tracker, I only had the initial version, and later on the Fiodo project published the JSON as well. And you will see I did iteration from the basic to the more advanced JSON and we will look at this in a few seconds. So each time your endpoint is connecting to any website or IP address and has the Defender for Endpoint agent configured or is onboarded to Microsoft Defender Endpoint, you can get this information within the portal, either through the device inventory and the timeline. So let's just go over here. So we have the device timeline, and within the device timeline, there is listed every event that is happening on the client or has happened on the client. So we have stuff like, I will zoom a bit out, but I hope you still can see it. MS Edge created a process, and here we have a network connection, the SVH host.exe established connection to this IP address, and we have also some information based on the IP address, which URL or host name is related to this IP address. And since we can access this data through the normal timeline from the client, we also can use a feature called advanced hunting to do this. Microsoft offers hunt for related events directly here. We will not use this today, but I will just jump over in my hunting queries, and there we have the basic advanced hunting query I used at the beginning. So for everybody who is not knowledgeable in KQL, KQL is the Custo query language, and it's the language that Microsoft is using in Defender for Endpoint, Sentinel, and every log analytics-based service they offer. It's a little bit like SQL, so if you have any previous knowledge within SQL, you shouldn't be too much effort to switch over to KQL or understand the language. Let's do a very basic example here. So we have different tables within the schema, and all of those tables have different columns as well. So if we just want to see device network events, let me show you like the last 100. You can do this like this, and then you get the information, which device accessed, which IP address, which port, what the local IP address, local port, and depending on the connection or what exactly was triggered here, you also get information on the process. So here we have a connection success. So this means it's an initial connection, initial TCP connection, and there we can also see which process was using this connection, the SVC host.exe, and other information like process command line and the date and stuff like that. The other thing we are seeing here is network signature inspected. This only means that Defender antivirus is analyzing the connection and is looking, okay, you are connecting to the remote port 50,616, and the protocol that is used is most likely HTTP, and there's some sampling in here. That's something more advanced, and we don't look more deeply into that now, but let's build on this query. So if we have any IP address here, let me just take any of those, and now I want to know if any of my clients have connected to this IP address. I can say where remote IP equals, and then I just put the IP address. Last 7 days, you can put this up to 30 days. That's the maximum you can search within Microsoft Defender for Endpoint Advanced Hunting. But you can also size this like only the last hour or stuff like that. Since it wouldn't be feasible to put each and every IP address in here and run this over your environment, you can use something called external data. And this is what we have here. So in this case, I'm creating a temporary table that is based on external data. And the only information within this external data is remote IP, and the type is string. This is something I can completely customize, and I use remote IP because this is exactly the name of the column in the other device network events table. I also could have named it Fabian or anything else I wanted. And this is the type, string in this case. It's not an integer, so string is the way to go. There is no type IP address or something like that. And now I define from where I want to consume the external data. And here I just put in the URL that we have seen here. And if I just execute this, and let me show you. It will download this list in the background, and I will get a new line for a new entry for each new line with the IP addresses, but also with the comments. So we can advance this a little bit and say, okay, where remote IP address does not start with hashtag, and then all the comments are removed. And now comes the interesting part. We now combine both of those data structures. So we have the botnet C2 IP address block list table, as well as the device network events. And in this case, I'm telling KQL, look at all the information in the device network events, where the remote IP is within the list botnet C2 IP block list. And now if I execute this, luckily none of my clients has connected to any of those IP addresses, but if that should be the case, I would get an entry down here and would see, okay, my client connected to this IP address. Going further from here, we also have the JSON information, and Custo also can consume JSON from external data, but it's a little bit more effort. But as you can see, not too much. I, in this case, define remote IP, remote port, and the status. Then the URL, in this case, the JSON document. And now instead of saying format is CSV, I say it's multi-JSON. And now I have to do a mapping of the JSON data to my different variables over here. So I say the column remote IP is within the properties of the JSON, and the path to the property is root.IP address. So in this case, one entry is the root and the IP address. And this I just repeat for port as well as status. And if I now execute this, I get more information from the JSON, because now I have the remote IP, the remote port, as well as the status of the C2 server. And now, since I have this data, I can join the information again with the device network events. And this time, I not only use the remote IP, but I do a join, inner join of the device networking events based on remote IP and remote port. So this is even more specific because now it's not like, okay, my client only connected to the remote IP address, but the client tried to connect to especially this port of the C2 server that is defined here. This makes this query much less false positive. Results in less false positives because most of those remote IP addresses might be regular websites. Somebody who has not protected their website very good, somebody took over the website and installed the C2 server on top of this server. So the normal website is still offering services on port 80.443, but the C2 server is running on some high port like 4643 or 8080, something like that. So if somebody would visit the website in the first example, this would trigger an alert, or I would get a result here. In the second, I only get this alert if the user or the tool would try to connect to this IP address and this specific port. So it's much more precise in going through your data.
Fabian, a quick question from me.
Yes.
I assume it's trivial for a C2 server to change its port. So is being that specific on the port, it's easier for a C2 server to change its port than to change its IP address. So is it a little too specific to specify the remote port when you're looking at this?
That's a good question. So in the final result, we will block the connection to the IP address. So you wouldn't be able to visit the website or the C2 server, but we only will alert if we are very sure that the connection was to the C2 server. So this will take a little bit away from your CSOC personnel, so they don't have to run after every connection to an IP address, but only to ones where we know the remote port was also a C2 server. But on the other hand, we will block all the connection to the IP address. So even if we miss the port because it's not updated in the list at this point, the client still couldn't connect to it. I will get to this in a few seconds, and then I will show you how this will work. So now we have our data. So we know, okay, as soon as we have a hit here, we know that a client tried to connect to a malicious server. Now we want to do an alerting on this. And this is where we have a feature that's called custom detection rules over here. And we can just create any custom detection rule right off the bat here, create detection rule. And now we can enter any name we want. Specify frequency, how often this query should run, depending on what data you are querying. You might only want to do this once a day, or the least amount is every hour. A layer title is a bit like the detection name, but it's more user specific. So you could do some internal naming convention in the detection name. And the alert title is something your CSOC personnel will see. Severity, we put it on high and select a category, in this case, malware. And now we can also add additional stuff like, let's see, what do we have? Crickbot, perfect, or Emotet. one of those we could use. Let me add this one here. And now we can also add a description and recommended actions for our CSOC personnel, so they can see what, or they have actionable intel what to do next with this alert. Just put it here and something now. I also can connect the information about which device was affected, so it will show up in the alert as well as the incident. And I will do this based on the device ID. And I can also say connect the user as well. And in this case, I will use the initiating process account UPN. So if the initiating process is based on Fabian Bader, and this alert will connect this user to this, will connect the user to this incident. And last but not least, you can also define actions. So you can do something like isolate the device. So as soon as something like this happens, isolate the device completely. Or selectively, but this means that you still can contact the user through Teams or Outlook, but anything else, all other network connectivity is cut off. The only network connectivity that is allowed in both cases is connectivity to the Defender portal, so that you can reverse this decision later on. I will not select this in this case. I can run an antivirus scan, I can initiate an automatic investigation, or I can even restrict app execution so that only Microsoft signed applications can be launched on this device until I release this device from this restriction. So now we have finished the wizard, and now this will be live, and each and every hour it will check, has any of your devices in your whole environment contacted any of the servers listed within this file? And if so, I will get an alert for each device, and also I get all the actions that I defined will be taken on the devices. Let's see, it already ran, so the initial run is through. Depending on your environment and how many clients you have in there, it will take a little bit longer for the first run, but now you can see in an hour it will repeat itself. So now let's take a look at the indicators of compromise I mentioned earlier. So this only would alert me. It would not prevent the user or the program to connect to the server. And this is where the indicators of compromise come in. First, I have to enable network-based custom indicators in the advanced features. So this should be enabled within your tenants so you can use the next feature. If this is the case, you have rules, indicators, and there you will see we have IP addresses. Currently, I only have one IP address in this list, and this is the website icar.org. So you might all know the icar test file, virus test file. So I took the liberty of using their website as a detection mechanism as well. And as soon as you have defined a new indicator here, you can also say what should happen. You get a warning, or what I want to do, I want to block the connection to this website and generate an alert. You might not want to generate an alert later on. As you will see, we already have a mechanism to alert you, but only want to block the execution, or in this case for a network indicator, block the connection. And now let's switch over to my demo machine. Oh, it's suspended. Okay. Let me just wake it up. So this is the machine that is onboarded. Let me log in. And now we will try to access the icar.org website. And this got blocked immediately. So this would be the Defender Smart Screen feature. I have no way to bypass this. So my organization has blocked access to this website. So this would be something the user would see if he would access a website that we blocked through an IP address. But what would happen if somebody would try to programmatically access this website? So if we do a invoke web request through PowerShell, we get this content is blocked by your IT admin, and the invoke web request is getting a 403. So the Defender HV network protection has put itself in between the requests to the website and the website itself, like a man in the middle, and has given back a 403 forbidden. And so your program that is trying to connect will abort and cannot access this data. So no way here. And even if I would use the address, this would make no difference. If you would use the test net connection port 443 and IP address, you will see this will result in a successful test on the port 443. This is because the Microsoft Defender antivirus engine takes this request and returns a 403. But the connection is made. So it looks like the connection was successful. But if you're using anything that is trying to get data out of this server, it will not get back any data and cannot connect to the server itself. So as you can see, we now have not only protection within the browser, but we also have protection on the network stack level of the operating system. So if I would try to execute TrickBot and it would connect to its C2 server, it had no chance to do this. It would get blocked. And also, this will result in an alert that now will pop up here. And as you can see, we have multiple alerts here now. And one of those is connection to ICAR detected and mitigated on desktop. And this is based on the custom indicator I did earlier. So I just hop over here to show it again. So the custom indicator here, this is called connection to ICAR detected and mitigated. And if you get an alert, it also adds the name of the computer. So you immediately see, okay, this happened on this computer. And we here also see, okay, this computer, this user, and now connect on this. Those two parts put together is really, really good, because now we can use something like Azure Automation, and I prepared this. It's not, I will show you how to set it up. It's a little bit too long for today. But what we have here is, oh, sorry, I have to switch over to the Azure portal. I have Azure Automation script that is running each and every hour and is updating the indicators of compromise for me. So as we have seen here, there's only one IP address within my indicator of compromises. Now let me start the automation. And This will only take a few seconds, or maybe a little bit more. That's a demo. It's running it. That's good. So now you already can see successfully imported and the indicator with the IP address. And if we now go back to the indicator lists, let me just refresh here. Now you have all those IP addresses in your custom indicator list. So like 223, one was already in there. And they are all configured that they will expire in 1 hour. So that's wrong. It should be 1 hour from now. I think it's a display error. And they block execution. So should any client now try to connect to any of those IP addresses, it cannot do this anymore. And through the custom detection that we have here, you will get an alert later on. Because what I did here is I disabled the alerting. So only connecting to this IP address will not alert you, but only if the connection was to the IP address and the port, then it will alert you. Otherwise, it will just block it. So we have the protection in place based on the IP address. So no worries about changing ports from the C2 server. But we only alert if both values, IP address and port, are exactly like they are defined here. Patrick, of course, I already did this. Let me just put up. You can read all about this on my blog. And on my blog, there is also the script to import the for the runbook. So this is the PowerShell script. It's getting the information from the website and putting in them indicators in there. And you also have pre-packaged ARM templates, so you can just one-click deploy this to your Azure subscription, and it will do everything for you. So just to show you how that would look. So this is downloading a JSON file with all the ARM templates, and now you can define, okay, which resource group, which app ID. This is something you have to create on your own. It's described in the blog post as well. What app secret have you created, and what is the automation account name? Everything else you don't have to change. And automation account. Within this automation account, let me just hop over here, an automation account, and in this automation account, you also have the runbook that is used to ingest this data directly into your indicators of compromise list in Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. And as well in the blog post, you will find all the custom queries and the custom detection, how to create it, or you can rewatch the video as well. This is the end for my demo. And if you have any more questions, please feel free. I'm happy to answer them right now or later on.
Thanks, Fabian. I think I just saw one question in there, which was from Patrick, just regarding whether you would be able to share that runbook.
Yeah, definitely. So I will put the link to the website as well in here, so you just can.
That's a really useful session, actually. So thank you. Just quickly, has anybody else got any questions?
let me just add something. If you want to use the network feature, there is something you have to configure on your end device, and it's called, as you might have guessed, network protection. So there is enable network protection in the Microsoft Defender HV. It's something you can configure through Intune or group policy, depending on the way you are managing your Microsoft Defender for Endpoint clients. Let me hop over here. So it's something that is network inspected, and there you can processing. No, that's not the right one. Yeah. Sorry for that. It's something prevent users from accessing websites or something like that. Okay, it's over here. Prevent users from and apps from accessing dangerous websites. So this is a feature you have to enable. And if you have enabled this, then the network protection feature in the Microsoft Defender AV will be enabled. And then you can use it.
Being used.
Yeah, thanks. I'm unfamiliar with the licensing on Defender for Endpoint with the new plans that came out recently. So you've got Plan 1, Plan 2, and then Business as well. Which is the features that you've gone through today available in Plan 1 or only Plan 2? And what about Business? Do you know?
Regarding Business, definitely, because this Business is mostly Plan 2. And I think the advanced hunting is not part of Plan 1. So this is something you cannot leverage if you're using. So the alerting would not be something you can use. Regarding the indicators of compromise, I'm not quite sure. I will have to follow up, and I will put the answer hopefully in the chat within the next session.
Thanks, Matt.
Fantastic. If there's nothing else, we'll hand over a bit early, but we'll hand over to Marcel. You ready, Marcel?
Hi there. Yep. Cool. Thanks, Fabian. That was really cool. That was really interesting session there. Really cool. Yeah, nice. That's. Thank you very much, and thanks Charlie and Chris as well for hosting the session and letting me come and talk with you here tonight, and to everyone in the who's joining the session. So I will share my screen. I'm also not too big on the slides, but let me know if you can see that. But I have a cool demo as well lined up. So just let me know once you can see the slides there.
Yeah, those are up for me. So that's brilliant. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. So just to introduce myself, my name is Marcel Lupo. I'm a Microsoft MVP in DevOps and Developer Technologies. I also work as a DevOps Architect Manager at Avanade. I've worked in security as well before, and yeah, very interested in the security aspect as well as automation, and automating security is for me a win situation. So that's what we're going to talk about today actually, is how we can do permissions, like almost like infrastructure as code, but we're going to use permissions as code, or security as code. My Twitter handle is on there as well, my LinkedIn if you want to connect with me or come and ask me any questions afterwards. I blog on Dev2, and you'll see that my handle there is PWD9000. And you can also find me on GitHub. I publish everything that I do on GitHub for the community to use. So yeah, let me start off with the first slide about the what and why. What is RBAC in Azure, in the Azure space? I do want to mention, just before I go into this topic, the RBAC that I'm going to be talking about is the when you're building resources in Azure, so specifically around ARM. So for example, storage accounts, resource groups, things like that, permissions, not Azure Active Directory groups or anything like that. This is more geared towards the custom role definitions within the Azure space. When, say for example, you're building a resource group and you want to give certain permissions to people to do that. But let's start with what is it? So permissions in Azure can basically be granted through role-based access control, also known as the IAM. An RBAC role is basically a collection of actions, and those actions can be allow actions or disallow actions, and they're just grouped together in a JSON object, which I'll show you in a minute, that to form a role. So things like you can do this, you can do that, but you can't do that, and then that you create your role along that. So it's basically just a collection of permissions that will create a role. Now, Microsoft, being really helpful, obviously builds a lot of these roles. They're called built-in roles, so they kind of come out of the box with what you think you might be using. So for example, if I give you an example, if you build a resource group and you give someone contributor access or maybe VM contributor access, there's quite a very large amount of built-in roles that you can use, so you don't need to go and configure your own ones. But what's the challenges with the challenges and risks with the built-in roles? Or sometimes it might you might have some requirement to be a much more granular or tailored permissions to give to someone rather than the out-of-the-box roles that they give. And I'll show a good example of this in the demo. Some of the other things as well, Microsoft, especially when there's new services that come out in Azure, they might not be, the role access for that role might not exist, or there might be one role that is there's just one role, but you need more granular roles for different permissions, maybe viewers, people who can execute things, people who maybe can't allow to delete things, but this role just gives everyone everything, so you don't really want to use that. Another thing is then you might start looking at creating custom roles. Now, custom roles can become quite complicated and messy, but it doesn't need to be. And this is what what this session is all about. So just to give you an example of a role definition, it's basically a JSON object that you can see in the screen here. It's just a single JSON object with a name, an ID, if it's custom or not. You can give it a description, and then you have a couple of things, a collection. So you have a collection of actions, a collection of not actions, data actions or not data actions, and then assignable scopes. Now, assignable scopes is where do you want the role to be surfaced? So for example, if you have 10 subscriptions or maybe 5 management groups, you would put them, let's say, for example, you only want to add this role to a particular subscription or surface it in that subscription so that you can start consuming it in that subscription. That's what an assignable scope is. You're just creating the role to be available in that subscription or set of subscriptions or management groups. So just going a little bit into what are actions and what are data actions and not actions. So actions is basically just an array of strings that gives you specific control. It's like a permission that can allow you to do something. The not action is pretty much the same, except it's the opposite. It doesn't allow that action. And then the actions and not actions are more for the control plane of Azure, where data actions are more to do with the data plane, so like in storage accounts and things like that. I won't go too much into this because we're going to go show you a demo of this. I'll be jumping back to this slide in a little bit as well, to and from when I start doing the demo. But when you're defining an action or a list of actions or permissions, they have to follow a certain kind of convention, naming syntax. And the syntax is basically company.provider name / the resource type and then / the action. Now the action at the end there can be one of only these 5 things here. You can either have a wildcard that encompasses all of the actions. You can have read, write, action, or delete. Now, when I say company.provider name / resource type, let's take a quick look at an example of a custom role. So here I've got a custom role called Custom Resource Health Reader. And I have a description here that says users with rights only view Azure resources, services, and subscription health. Now, if you look at the actions I've got here, I'm using Microsoft.resourcehealth /star, which means I want anything under resource health /read. So what this means is I want this role basically is going to give me permissions to read or view anything about resource health in my, to whoever I apply this role. So group B or maybe my monitoring admins over the entire subscription will be able to, or maybe some stakeholders who just want to see the health. And you'll see here that my assignable scopes I give my subscriptions. Whoops, I just jumped 2 screens ahead there. In my subscriptions here, you'll see I've put in the subscription here. I will jump back to those in a bit once we do the demo, but imagine, this is one file, one permission. Now, say, for example, one of the challenges and risks that you might face is once you start doing granular permissions and roles, you might end up, you might write them and keep them in a folder and maybe run a PowerShell script, and maybe a week later, that role needs to change or gets removed. Things can become really messy, and you can kind of lose track of what, because it's all code. So the solution that I want to show you today is to apply DevOps and automate this solution. Because like I said in the beginning, it can become difficult and unmanageable, but it doesn't need to be. Automating custom roles, custom role definitions can really ease up the administration of maintaining permissions. You can seamlessly create definitions or on the fly or, through automated processes like pipelines in Azure DevOps. I would also say make Git your source of truth. And I will show you a really good example of why I say that in the demo. And for me, permissions or security as code allows for centralized management of role definitions and can, really simplify the process involved in maintaining them. So I'm just going to jump straight into a demo here to show you. I don't know if you've worked in DevOps before or Azure DevOps, but basically I have a folder structure here with DevOps that I'm going to use as for my automation. Now I have a pipeline here, an automation pipeline in a pipelines folder. I have role definitions folder, and I have a scripts folder. And only that basic structure, we can now start looking at what we want to do. Before I jump into DevOps, let me just quickly go into Azure, because I feel like I want to just show you what these built-in roles look like just before we start creating custom ones. So if you go into Azure, you've probably seen this. If you create a resource or a resource group or a subscription, you have this access control IAM functionality here. And you can then add people, you can add groups or users to have certain permissions using those roles against that subscription or resource group or storage account or whatever. If we take a quick look at roles here, you'll see that out of the box, there are, Microsoft supplies so many roles, which are those built-in roles. You have owner, contributor, reader, ACR, and the list just goes on and on and on and on. But these roles might not always be, sufficient. You might need to go granular, and that's where we will have the custom roles. Now, just quickly jumping back to DevOps, just let me know if the screen size is okay, if you can see it all right, if you want me to make it bigger or smaller, because I can't actually see what I'm presenting here. But what I wanted to show you was from this slide, this example, custom resource health reader, I have basically, if I come back out here, I've basically set that up in my DevOps as a JSON file here, and you can see that custom role. It's a JSON file, and I've basically set it up here. Now, I have a pipeline, an automation pipeline that will run. If we just have a look at this pipeline real quick for a moment, let me try and make it a little bit bigger. So this pipeline has a trigger, and you'll see the path that I'm including. If I just make that a bit smaller. Now, remember, the path is relative to my project repository, my Azure role definitions repository. I have a folder called role definitions. So if we look at the trigger, you'll see the paths that I'm including is my role definitions path. So this is where I'm going to keep my roles for my RBAC roles, is in that folder. So this pipeline will trigger if I make any changes or add any new files. This automation is going to trigger based on that path. Now, the pipeline, all it's going to do is it's got a job, a single job, and this job has got 3 steps. So the steps that it's going to do is going to check the code out. It is going to run a task group, which is basically going to say, just go and get the files. We'll go through this YAML file in just a moment. And then the second template is just going to run it's going to set that RBAC. Now let's take a look at this first thing that's going to happen. My task groups for getting changed files. Now, because we're working in Git, what I want to do is if I add extra files to my role definitions, because I want each file to be a role in my role definitions, all I'm doing is I'm running a PowerShell script where I'm saying, just look at using git diff, what files have changed, meaning any files that's been added or that's been changed, is going to create a list or an array of those files where they're located. What I'm then going to do is I'm basically going to just create a PowerShell array of those files, and I'm going to create a pipeline variable to consume in my next step, and that variable is going to be role definitions, and it's just a list of role definitions. So that is pretty much what my first step is going to be. Just go and get the files that's changed and any new files and create a list. Now my second task is going to be to run a PowerShell script, and this PowerShell script has got one parameter called role definitions. And if you look at the variable here that I'm calling, remember, I'm creating a list of changed or new files in my first step, and that is going to create a pipeline variable called role definitions. And that role definitions is just going to be a list of the files. And here I am consuming that variable to say, run my script and give it all the role definitions that I want to update or create. Now, if I look at the script that's being run, you'll see my input parameter is an array called role definitions. And what it's going to basically do, now remember, this is a JSON file, and this permission here is basically just a JSON object. So what my PowerShell script is going to do is for every one of those files, it's going to basically get the content of the file from JSON. So it's going to create a JSON object for me in PowerShell. And then I'm going to look at the assignable scopes that I've picked in that JSON object. So for example, it's going to look at this subscription where, you know, what the PowerShell script is going to do is it's going to say, my first file, go and look what is the assignable scope. Then I'm doing a little bit of logic because I'm going to say, because remember, you can have this roles surface at a management group or at a subscription. So all I'm doing is I'm saying, if the scope is a management group, have a look at the children of those management groups. If there are other management groups, set the context to the management group. If it is a subscription, set the context to the subscription. Because what I want to do is I want to check if the role definition already exists or not. Because I want to be able to update existing ones and create ones when they're new. So my script is just going to do a little bit of logic and just say, does this role already exist in that subscription? If it does, it will go and make the changes. It would update that role. If it doesn't exist, it's going to create the role for me. And it does the same if my scope was a subscription. So it's a very basic PowerShell script that is just going to take each of these files and evaluate, does the role exist or does it not exist? So let me quickly show you. So I've actually run this pipeline before. So if we just jump back into Azure and change our, if we go to, you know, the subscription, go to IAM, go to roles, and go and look at the custom roles, you'll see here is my custom role, custom resource health reader, you know, users with rights to only view resource, Azure resources, services and subscription health. Now, what's really nice about this is I can go and view the permissions, and you see here is my actions and data actions. And remember, I said that that provider was called Microsoft.health. And if you remember, I'm saying I want anything under resource health to be read. So if we take a quick look, these are all the options under resource health, and you'll see the permission against it is all read. I can also actually look at the JSON object in the Azure portal as it is shown in my Azure DevOps. And then I can also go and look, where is this assigned? Where is this role assigned? Is it group A on subscription B, or, you know, where is this role actually assigned? But what I want to do for this demo is I want to create a new role. So I'm just going to jump back to DevOps here, and I'm just going to do this in the DevOps repo. I'm not going to open Visual Studio or anything like that. I'm just going to simply create a new file in here, and let's call this custom VM operator.json. And there I've got my blank file here. Now, if you don't know where to begin or what to do here, I'm going to give you a tip, and this is so well documented. So if you head off onto the Microsoft Docs documentation for built-in roles, I'm just going to quickly show you this. It's a massive page, but under Microsoft built-in roles, it will actually, from there, you can actually go and look at every single built-in role that Microsoft has out of the box. Now, you'll see here, I've got virtual machine administrator login. I've got virtual machine contributor. Let me make this a little bit bigger, so I realize it's a little bit small. So you see here, I've got virtual machine administrator login, virtual machine contributor, virtual machine user login. I don't have anything in between, right? Virtual machine contributor, let's click on that one. Okay, so now I can see exactly what actions I'm going to get. I've got authorization read, compute availability, anything about availability sets, anything of locations, anything for virtual machines. This is too much permissions. I don't want to give people this much permissions. You know, disks, write, read, delete. People can delete stuff. I don't I don't want that. I want just to create a VM operator role where my admins can maybe turn on a VM, turn off a VM, and maybe restart a VM. Nothing more. So, but what I can do now is I can actually look, if I scroll down a little bit more, it actually gives me the JSON object of this built-in role. So I actually have all the action, I already have the whole object here. But what I'm going to do, because I created one a bit earlier, which is kind of a trimmed down version of that contributor, this one that's too much permissions. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to jump back to DevOps, and I'm just going to paste this code in here, and let me make that a little bit bigger. And this is a trimmed down version of the contributor, the VM contributor. You see, I've called it custom VM operator. Now, here I'm saying, users only grant access to turn VMs on and off. That's it. I don't want them to create VMs or delete VMs or do any crazy stuff with the VMs. If you look at the actions, I've got authorization read, I've compute read. That will just give them the ability to see the VMs, my teams. And here's the granular permission. You see, I can give Microsoft Compute, virtual machines, deallocate action, which means they can turn off a virtual machine and deallocate it. I also want to be able to perform maintenance, start a VM, maybe redeploy a VM, and restart a VM. I also have insights, read only. So in case someone wants to look at the VM insights, or maybe look at the networking, if it's applied at the resource group, and maybe look at all the resource groups, but not necessarily create or delete any of the resource groups. And I want to surface this role on my subscription. So I say, I want to make this role available at my subscription. Now, remember, this is a new file under my role definition. So when I save and commit this file, it's going to trigger my pipeline, my automation pipeline. So let's do that. I'm just going to commit this. I'm just going to say, create a new VM operator role. And if I commit that, what's actually happening now is that trigger would have triggered now because there's been a change made, and it's going to go and look which files changed, and then it's going to evaluate, does the role exist or does it not exist? If it exists, it's going to update the role, and if it doesn't, it's going to create it. So if we take a quick look at that pipeline, you'll see here that it's starting. It's basically starting up. Takes a minute to warm up, but I mean, once I've configured my roles, I can now go off and go get a coffee or something, and just wait a few minutes while this is going to run. Hopefully, it will start off soon. It looks to be queued at the moment. I want to, while that's running, I want to talk a little bit about, let me just go back to, okay, it looks like it's running now. Yep, that is going to run. Actually, let's look at this while it's running, because I want to show you how the different files are being picked up and, all of those things. So remember, the first step was to check out the code. It's going to check out the repository. It's going to then run a simple PowerShell script to go and look what files using git head, what files have been added or changed. So if we take a look at that, you'll see here, it's found this file, which is a new file that I've created. Let me try and make this a little bit bigger. You can see that. So it's basically looked at the file. Now there could be multiple files that I created, multiple roles, and then it just converts it for me to a PowerShell string array, which looks like that. And that's what's going to be input into my PowerShell script as an input parameter. So if we look at the PowerShell script being triggered, it's going to go now and look and evaluate, does this role, it's basically taking that file, the content of that file, creating a JSON object, looking at the assignable scopes, and then going and evaluating and saying, does this role exist in that subscription or not? If it does, it's going to maybe update the permissions. And if it doesn't, it's just going to create the role for me. So let's just see that for a moment when that runs here. And you'll see that it's currently connecting to that subscription. And see what happens next. Take a little bit of time. It's a demo, I guess. So you see here, it says to me, the role definition does not exist, so it's going to create it. Awesome. So there it is. It's created. If I refresh my pipeline run, should be finishing any moment. That's finished. Now, if I go back to Azure, take a quick look here. If I refresh my custom roles, there you see, there is my VM custom operator as part of my custom roles now. So let's take a quick look at that. I have my authorization, read, everything, compute, I have read, so people can see the VMs. I've got insights. It doesn't actually show all of them. There's quite a few network ones. Let me just minimize all of that. So they use the resources is basically resource groups. So I've got authorization, compute, insights, network, resources. I can also look at the JSON object that I said earlier and said, okay, cool. They've got all of this stuff here. Awesome. I can now go and assign this. So let's quickly go to one of my resource groups. Let me quickly find one. Go to a resource group here. Let's take Network Watcher RG, for example. I'm going to go to IAM, and I'm going to add a role assignment. And I'm going to say, remember, I want my custom role, and there is my VM operator. I'll go next, and I'm going to say, I want to give this role to RBAC group 1. Select that, I'm going to review and assign that role. Now, if we go and look at the role assignments on this resource group, it's going to change the scope to this resource. You'll see there's my RBAC group and the role. So anyone that's in that group can now basically, if there's any VMs in this resource group, they'll be able to see the VMs and they'll be able to stop and start them. Maybe redeploy them, whatever I want it. Now, say, for example, someone comes to me in a month and says, actually, it's really cool that we can do that, but we want a little bit of extra permission. I go, okay, well, what permission do you want? And they're like, well, we want to be able to see the storage accounts, or we want to, see what storage accounts is in the resource group. Okay, fine. I can then go and just take my JSON file, and I can just quickly go and edit that. Make this a bit smaller again, just so you can see. Actually, a bit bigger. Just going to go and add storage, and I'm going to, and you'll see here that I've given all access to read anything storage. I'm just going to commit that. I'm just going to say added storage reader or storage view /read. I'm going to commit that. And again, my pipeline should be triggering. While that's running, I just want to quickly jump into, I'm going to quickly go back to this slide here where I'm talking about when you're defining actions using company.provider name /resource./action. So remember, I said you can either have a wildcard action a read action, a write, or almost like action is almost like execute or delete permissions against a resource type, against a provider. Now, you see we've used star there in quite a few places. So if I just quickly go back to DevOps, let's take a quick look at the permission that I just added. I said I want everything for storage read, star. Now you might be wondering, well, what exactly is star? What does that mean? How can I find out what permissions is star? So what you can do, again, what I said earlier is you can come to the built-in roles in Microsoft to look at some of the built-in roles to get examples. But if you want to look at what the providers give in detail, you would go to the next page, which is called Azure Resource Provider Operations. Now, Azure Resource Provider Operations will give you every single resource. So in our case, we did storage, and you'll see here Microsoft.storage. Just going back to the slide. Going back to the slide here. Remember, I said company.provider name. So that would be Microsoft.storage. So going back to here. Now in here, I can see every single action that Microsoft storage or every single permission very granularly what I can do. So I said I want Microsoft storage star read. So if I just do a search here just to highlight for me read and make this a little bit smaller, I've essentially given the read access. It's a bit too small, sorry. There's quite a lot of permission here, but I've essentially given all read access about all storage accounts. Now, say for example, let me just quickly go back to storage. So we'll just go back to the storage here. Say for example, okay, everyone has got reader access. Let's just have a quick look and see if that has changed my role now. So if we go back to the pipeline, you see that's finished running. Now, if I go back to my subscription, go back to the IAM, and if we look at roles, it's a little bit bigger. And we look at the custom roles for VM operator, you will now see that, it's going to show all of these. Just go right to the bottom actually here. Skip past all the networking ones. So you'll actually see that I have Microsoft storage there now and all the read permissions against Microsoft storage. And again, I can go and look at the JSON and I can see that my storage is now added there. Now I want to show you an example of where we would use a not action. So say, for example, someone comes to me and go, or I build up a little bit more trust, or the team builds it more. Another team maybe needs a little bit different access. So what we can do is show you an example of a not action. So let's say, for example, I want to give the team any access to storage, but I want them to be able to create storage accounts, maybe look after them, maintain them, but maybe as part of a not action, I don't want them to delete storage accounts. So what I'm essentially doing here is I'm saying I'm giving all operational access over storage, but I'm saying not able to delete storage. And again, if I save this file, it's going to run my pipeline and it's going to basically update this permission group or this role definition, this custom role definition. And so what's the benefits in using DevOps? Well, like I said before, it's automated. I don't have to go and run PowerShell commands to create new roles or update them, and getting confused with which files is in a folder somewhere on a file server, and what's it's all Git becomes, and DevOps and the Git repo kind of becomes my source of truth. If ever I need to make any changes to any permissions, I have all my role definitions as files here, and I can just add more ones, and I can change the permissions within them, or create really custom ones. And this is kind of going to just be reflected automatically in my Azure subscription or management group, and it's all in one nice place. Another nice thing about Git and using source control is, if you're working in a team, a team member, a security team member might be looking after permissions. He wants to maybe make a change or has got a request for a permission. You can create a branch from your master branch and have a pull request. So, for example, if someone needs to approve that permission change, a senior member of the team can go and look at the pull requests, and they can questions like, oh, why do you want to give this permission? And have more like of an audit trial and almost like a code review. But again, it's permissions as code. I like to call this, or security as code, rather than and this sort of mechanism ties in really well if you're using already DevOps and things like infrastructure as code and things like that. The same sort of practices and things would apply to this sort of thing for a security team, for example. Another nice thing about this is you have Git history tracking. So, for example, I can easily go and, for example, look at, say, for example, there's a permission has changed on this role definition. I can go into the history, or I can even go and compare, what has changed from my last. Let's see if I can swivel this around here. So I can see from my previous version what's changed, basically what permissions were added and removed. And you can have a complete Git, file operation history of how a role definition has evolved over time, and you can kind of track who's made those changes and things like that. So it becomes really valuable to start utilizing DevOps and Git to basically maintain your role definitions for custom RBAC. And I mean that is pretty much it for the demo. I did kind of whiz through that, so I don't know if there's any questions, or I do have all of the code samples of this if you wanted to try it out in your own environment. I also have a blog version of this in DevOps, and I also have a blog showing how to do exactly the same thing in GitHub, in case you're using like GitHub Actions instead of Azure DevOps pipeline. So there's both, tooling that you can use to achieve the same thing.
Yeah, Marcel, fantastic presentation. Thank you. DevOps is something I've been getting to grips with recently myself, and fantastic tool, especially for that multi-use case if you want to use it across multiple areas. But fantastic, and something I'll look to add to my list, should we say, for to look into. I think we've got a question there from Banny. You've got your hands up, mate.
Yeah, fantastic talk, and I can immediately see where I could apply this. When you obviously set this up with the DevOps pipelines, you're going to have to be using a service principal within to be able to deploy those changes to Azure, to those RBAC rules. Where exactly are you sort of giving the DevOps agent service principal access, if it could obviously apply it to management groups? And what roles would you be giving the DevOps pipeline to be able to actually publish the role?
That is a really good question. And so, for example, let's take a quick look here. So obviously, when you set up a pipeline, you do need a service connection. So you'll see here I've got a custom RBAC SPN or service principal for kind of DevOps. Magic Onion M is my org, you could say. So I do have that. Permission-wise, let me just quickly check, because there you are right. It is a high permission because it is creating roles and stuff like that. But let me have a quick look. Just bear with me one moment. Just want to quickly check. So I just give you the right information. I think it was user access administrator on the SPN, but let me just double check that. Very good question. It's a very, very good question. Service principal. Just checking if it's on my blog at all. I could get you that offline, maybe, if you want to have a chat with me, or I'm sure it's on the blog as well. Just have a quick look in here. Actually, I could see that from here. Okay, there we go. My screen is so big that I cannot expand this. I think, is it this one? It is this one. So it's management group reader. And I'm sure there was more permission to it. User access administrator. That's it. Yes. Okay. Perfect. I just had to remind myself there. Yeah. So when the pipeline is running, remember it's connecting. The service connection is connecting to Azure, and then what it's doing is it's looking at the assignable scopes to see whether your assignable scope is a management group or a subscription. It only needs management group reader to be able to do that. And to be able to create the custom role definitions, it also needs user access administrator. So your service principal will only need those two roles to perform these actions on the, obviously, the top level of your org. If your pipeline is going to manage role-based access control over multiple subscriptions under a management group or management groups, you want that service principal to sit right at the top of what it needs to evaluate and have the management group reader at a minimum, the reader, and the user access administrator in order to basically check, does this role exist? And if it doesn't, create it, or if it does exist, update it.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Right. No worries. Yes. Very, very good question, that one. So, yeah.
Dean.
Yeah, thanks, mate. I've got a less good question. Why is your timer now out?
Actually, my demo VM is an Azure VM, basically. I do all my talks and demos and things on an Azure VM, and that VM I think sits in West Europe or North Europe. I can't remember, but it's because it's not. Yeah, it's just an Azure VM, and I'm too lazy to change the time to UK time.
Fine.
He's actually time traveling, Dean. If you want the real answer.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I was trying to work out if he was in a different country, but I was thinking, what country will be an hour before us? That would be.
It'd be UTC.
Yeah.
So we're in BST, so it'll be running UTC, so it's GMT essentially.
But where would where would UTC be in the world right now?
Well, Azure runs on UTC, doesn't it? Otherwise,
I think it's Netherlands.
and then it projects it.
Surely Netherlands is later than us. They're like 10:30 now, rather than maybe somewhere in
like the Canaries.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, actually, you're right.
It's to the west of us, isn't it?
What about South Africa?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I was thinking, where on earth could you be? And then I saw your you had a hotmail.co.uk address. I was thinking that's definitely the UK. I don't understand, so I thought I'd just ask the question. Thanks for.
Yeah, I mean, I'm based in Surrey, so just south of London. So, strange. I'm not sure. I've not really paid attention to that, to be honest, too much.
I'm picky, sorry.
Oh, that's it. Yeah, UK no daylight saving time enabled. That's probably what it is. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if was there any other questions, or it's I mean, do any of you guys use custom RBAC or have to create custom role definitions in your environment? I'm sure you've come across the situation where you need to have a granular role for, that the built-in role is probably not sufficient because it just gives too much permissions, maybe. I don't know what your opinion is on situation like that, if you've come across it.
Yeah, they are very broad scoped, really. Some of the rules that are out there, but it's something that I would like to look into personally, to use with ourselves and and customers. Definitely think where you need to use the least privilege as possible.
Yeah.
The thought process I had was very much in like an MSP background, where if you're running a managed Azure for a customer, potentially you might want the customer to have certain permissions, like the start, restart, stop VM piece, but actually there may be areas where you don't want them to read or see within that environment, whereas really role's quite broad. Stuart's just popped a question in. What are the privileges for patching required?
How do you mean, like patching, operating system patching? I'm not entirely sure I understand the question.
So yeah, he's on about operating system patching.
So remember the role-based access control is more aimed towards the Azure, how do you say, the platform, the Azure portal pane. Patching inside of a VM is a completely different ball game. It's like
Marcel, I was just going to say, it's Alan here. What you mean? It's the RBAC aimed at the control plane, the management plane, as opposed to the data plane.
Exactly. Yes, the management plane. Yeah, sorry, but been a long day. But yeah, exactly. So when you're looking, if you're starting to look at inside of and you do have data plane permissions, and what I would suggest is going, I can share these links. I don't think, because VMs generally they're tied in with things like Active Directory, domain controllers and things like that, and these sorts of things then goes into a different domain of management. These sort of roles that I'm talking about here is more the control plane of Azure, like who can create storage accounts, who can create VMs, for example, not necessarily go inside of the VM and patch that VM. That's a different sort of area, more of a data plane. So I would say to go and check the data plane options. I think you'll find, though, however, that like I said, in the resource provider operations, you can go and kind of look and see exactly, for example, if we take a look at compute, you can kind of exactly see what sort of actions is available, and if there are any data actions. Let me just quickly have a look. So there are data actions, but there are things like disk download, disk upload, taking a snapshot. You see, so there it doesn't actually encompass patching in that sense. For that, you would need to, like, for example, look at your Active Directory groups and domain controllers and more, look at those permissions and things like that inside of the operating system rather than the control plane of Azure, if that makes any sense, if that answers your question.
Is that okay, Stuart?
I think from me, I think there's less of a concept of RBAC within the operating system, right? It's local admin or not. So you probably need local admin access in order to do that.
Exactly, yeah.
If you're on the OS itself, but if you've got remote access to it, you could maybe push down a group policy for that, which needs to be an admin. The RBAC is much less of a concept in on-premise. It's much more rich in the cloud.
Yeah, agreed.
Unless, of course, you're using Azure patch management, and then it's a different ball game.
Of course, good shout.
Yeah, and I want to stress as well that as I said before, I started before my presentation, is if you look at Azure Active Directory, the identity provider, that's the identity provider for your users, and that itself has got its own groups and things as well. And this, that is quite limited as well to what you can do with regards to fine-grained groups in setting in Azure Active Directory. This sort of RBAC is specifically against ARM. So things like the different providers, the resource provider operations within the Azure platform. And those are things like platform infrastructure sort of things like, creating compute or creating networking or creating storage, things like that. It's not really creating users or APIs or things like that. It's a different sort of, you're kind of going to a different sort of permissioning realm, if you could say. That is, I would probably say that the ARM resource provider operations is so vast and granular that if you're using them extensively, that's where a solution like this would become really handy for you to use DevOps to maintain that. And
got any more questions? One there for Fabian, I believe. Still here with us, yeah. Have you worked with Azure Arc on-prem and AMA?
Yeah, I have worked a little bit with the Arc, but yeah, maybe add something to the question where I might help.
Should we move forward, because we've got the quiz to do, and I know Chris is probably wanting to get straight into bed because he's feeling rough.
Yeah, just a little bit. No, fantastic sessions. Thanks, both Fabian and Marcel.
No worries. Thank you for thanks for inviting me. It's been really nice. Thank you.
So, yeah, no, thank you both. They're both fantastic sessions and great to have some live demos as well. With pretty much not being hit by any curses of live demos, which is always always good. So as always, we always post our feedback form up because it would be great just to get a little bit more feedback and understand whether there's other things you'd like to see and how the group's going. It's the only way we learn, really. Myself and Chris learn how to progress things forward. Next, we have our quiz. So doing it slightly different. Doing it slightly different this month. So rather than having a social media prize, we're going to have a first and second prize for the quiz. So with that, I'm going to try to launch quiz software and hope it all works.
Yeah, so the first prize we're playing for £40 Amazon voucher. If you're outside of the UK, we'll get a digital voucher to you of the equivalent in your local currency. There's also some swag for the UK winners, and similar with second prize. And there's a Lego set with some HCG swag. And if you're outside of the UK, we'll send you a voucher with the equivalent prize money. Cost of the Lego.
Hopefully you should all see this.
You can.
Cool. So, obviously, way to connect in as we've always done. Hold that up.
Quite weird. On my screen, I just see a how to take part thing. You can't see that at all, but how to take part, and then a little heart button, which is why
You don't see any of the instructions.
It's just no. It just says how to take part, and there's a little heart button. You can see all the hearts popping up on the screen as people tap the only button they've got on their screen. Yeah, little circle heart. Yeah, it's cute, isn't it? Look at those
Same
hearts
here.
popping up. Maybe if we go to the next screen, then it'll just, there you go. You can tap in your name. Look at that.
$14 in total, so around the 12 mark. 10.
Any more for any more? Chris, how do you usually do this? Do you just hit next screen and then hit start countdown?
Yep.
Are we good, everyone?
Oh.
Right. Oh,
go back.
Yeah.
Sorry. Press enter.
Okay.
Okay, it's answer fast to get more points.
So what is the MCRA? Is it the Microsoft Cloud Reference Architecture, Microsoft Cybersecurity Reference Architecture, Microsoft Cybersecurity Resource Audit, or Microsoft Cybersecurity Resource Alerts? So we've got 5 split decision with 5 getting it right, 5 getting it wrong. On to the next one. What is the Microsoft Expert Assistance Program called with Defender for Endpoint? Microsoft Threat Experts, Microsoft Remote SOC, Microsoft Threat Analysts, and Microsoft Security Experts. So 6 getting it right and 4 getting it wrong. What tool could you use to allow access to on-premise application from a remote client? Azure AD Connect, Azure AD App Proxy, or Remote Desktop Gateway? You can tell I was half asleep when I wrote that.
It's tough, that one.
You can split again.
Yeah. Which of these is not an identity protection risk? Anonymous IP address, atypical travel, sign in from a mobile device, unfamiliar sign-in location.
telnet.
Right. Question 5. Microsoft Unified Data Governance Service was renamed this month. What is it now called? Is it Azure Purview, Microsoft Purview, Microsoft Data and Governance, or Azure Purview? So halfway point. Let's have a look who's leading. It's between Banny and Dean at the moment, with Jordan not too far behind, Fabian and Marcel lacking slightly further behind. Right, so question 6. Which Linux distro is most commonly associated with hacking and pen testing? Fedora, Mint, Kali, or Ubuntu? So I want to do Vic Reeves there and go and Bob Mortimer, if anybody remembers Shooting Stars.
I do remember it, yeah, fortunately. Not as young as I look.
Right, question 7. What is the name of the Microsoft exam SC400? Security Operations Analyst, Identity Access Administrator, 365 Security Administration, or Information Protection Administrator?
That was a bit of a tough one, really.
Yeah. Split.
Sorry.
Right, question 8. Which of these is not in Azure AD, is not an Azure AD built-in role? Attack Payload Author, Attack Simulator Administrator, Security Advisory Administrator, Security Reader. See, that's a difficult one.
I only thought security reader, to be honest. Was the only one. Yeah.
Question 9. Which of these are used for Microsoft Secure Score? National security level, staff training level, device type, or user behavior? Okay, split of the field again.
I think this is going to be really tight tonight.
Yeah. And finally, question 10. What is the feature called that enables you to control Microsoft's access to your data? Lockbox, Exchange Secure, Exchange Support, or Padlock? And pretty much everyone got that. Right, on to the results.
Did any change at the top? Oh.
And Jordan's picked it.
Nice.
Well
Well
done,
done, Jordan.
And then we've also got Banny, second place.
Yeah.
Well done, guys. If you can reach out to me on my email address, chris@mscsug.org. I'll just paste it in the chat. Yeah, it's easier to type than say. But if you just drop me an email over, and I'll speak to the marketing team and get them to send them prizes out.
Right. So well done, guys. this should resume where we were. So yeah, obviously, Jordan, that's a £40 Amazon voucher for yourself if you're based in the UK with some HTG swag. Also, once you pass those details to Chris, I'll get a sticker and coaster sent over as well from some of our swag as well, separately. Banny, you get the Lego set this time, and also some more HTG swag.
Yeah, just say a massive thank you to HTG as well for sponsoring the user group.
Yeah.
You know, we wouldn't be able to offer these prizes if it wasn't for the guys over at HTG. So a massive thank you.
So yeah, no, thank you everyone for joining today or tonight even. Yeah, 2 fantastic sessions by Fabian and Marcel. So really enjoyed those sessions. So thank you both for coming on and giving up your evening really to do the sessions with us. So obviously this session was recorded. So once the recording's done, I'll get that edited and uploaded to our YouTube channel, which links in the chat, will be posted on our socials, which obviously Twitter, you can follow us on MSCSUG, and on LinkedIn, obviously we've got our go.mscsug.org/LinkedIn. And yeah, so next event is planned for 26th of May at the same time, 8 PM BST. We've got 1 speaker confirmed already. We're just waiting for confirmation on the second speaker, and then that should be good to go. So thank you all.
Thank you very much. Have a great evening.
Thanks very much, guys.